the historical time markers to conceptualizations that went into giving birth to such terms and expressions. Pan-Africanism was coined by Henry Sylvester Williams, who was a member of the British socialist reformist organization called the Fabian Society. White people in Britain who were socialists had Henry Sylvester Williams, your father of Pan-Africanism, bankrolled to start a movement that is called the Pan-African movement in 1900. And it's from the first conference that the Fabian Society, these white British socialist reformists, funded and organized to have hosted. It is the time that the word made its entry into world vocabulary and came to be used as the standard term used by so-called, African intellectuals, all over the world. But references throughout history gradually deviated from what the term was coined for, in terms of how the concept map that organized reasoning instrumentalities that went into conceptualizing behind it looked. You have Kwame Nkrumah in later years, who is acclaimed the father of Pan-Africanism, the father of the African Revolution in Africa, who in his book, Ghana, the autobiography of Kwame Nkrumah, makes it clear in no uncertain terms that although earlier in the very same work he claimed to have been influenced by Garvey's work that is compiled into a book called Opinions and Philosophies of Marcus Garvey. Later on, in another place in the very same book, he says, although that is the case, although he is also chanting Africa for Africans, his political philosophy differs from that of Garvey. That of Garvey was black nationalism and not African nationalism. So Kwame Nkrumah's, distinction of African nationalism and black nationalism is very, very bizarre, especially if we can confine ourselves, to finding reasons, investigatively finding reasons, why he distinguished, between black and African. The implication for this is you can be African without being black. And you can be black and not be African. There are black people who are not African, and there are African people who are not black. Maybe this is one of the things that expose his race dismissist attitude foreground in his race neutral philosophy. That's why he even had the nerve to alienate his affection from his race by marrying outside of it. I know most of you in these Pan-African spaces would say that's a personal choice. But a woman is the epitome, a race, of a nation. At a microcosmic level, when you marry a black woman, you reinscribe your affection to your people, to your race. When you marry outside of your race, you display the alienation of your affection from your race. Your affection is alienated from your race. That's why you marry outside of a race. So Nkrumah married outside the race. He married the pale Arab from Egypt, who, to Nkrumah's continentalist definition of an African, fitted into what Nkrumah conceived to be what an African is. He was never a race man. He did not even have African-centered leanings in terms of the spiritual-cultural, although he would use the word culture, cultural freedom, cultural this and that for Africa. He was grossly and embarrassingly decentered. In his book, Conscientism, he defines the African conscience as, being a combination of Euro Christian tradition, Islamic tradition, and African original tradition. He introduces this concoction of the three as what the African conscience is composed of. Can we imagine? When we define the African conscience, Nkrumah says it is composed of the Euro-Christian religion, the Islamic religion, and the African original, traditions. Really? So this is where I come in. And if this is Pan-Africanism, we continue to expose it. We continue to issue indictments against it to say those who are for the revolution, those who are for African-centeredness, those who are for race-centeredness, have the term Pan-Africanism far removed from their thinking within, its historical, time marker, where it is located conceptually by its inceptional reality. If that is what you dispute Pan-Africanism to be, it means you have invented your own Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism can never be anything other than what Henry Sylvester Williams coined and the movement that he established, to use the terminology, as part of its name, and the kind of thinking that went into theorizing, about African liberation, African independence, by these men whose minds were pervaded by intellectual traditions and religions of dislocation that are foreign to Africa. W.E.B. Du Bois, George Padmore, C.L.R. James. I mean, these were